Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Great Couch. We will discuss all things ABA, entrepreneurship, and lifestyle. We have a very special series that will be dedicated to parents as well as parents of children with special needs. Today, I am excited to have Nadine Wright-Arbubakrr join us on The Great Couch to discuss community resources and building your village. Thank you again, Nadine, for joining us today. Can you tell us about yourself?
Hi, Nandi. Thank you so much for having me and doing this series. I think it's very much needed, especially for our special needs community. So thank you for that. But as you said, my name is Nadine Wright-Arbubakrr. I'm also a proud mother of a 16-year-old nonverbal son who's on the autism spectrum. I'm also president and founder of a 501c3 nonprofit organization inspired by my son, Nason, called Nason's Place.
Awesome. And in terms of your organization, which areas do you service?
Well, Nason's Place, as I mentioned, was inspired by my son, who's now 16 years old. He's nonverbal. When he was diagnosed back in 2006, I was trying to find resources in my community, and I predominantly live in urban inner city, Essex County, New Jersey, and I couldn't find programs in the community. I couldn't find respite. I couldn't find support groups. I couldn't find sensory events or programming. It existed, it just didn't exist in urban inner city. Right. So I embarked on a journey to start a nonprofit that will allow me and others like me dealing with an autism diagnosis to be able to stay in our own community and get the resources we need to help our children live the best productive lives that they can.
Okay, thank you for that. What would you suggest for those families to do? And when I say newly diagnosed, I'm referencing their child being newly diagnosed with autism.
Well, first and foremost, I want those families and those parents to know, number one, you're not alone. It can be very overwhelming for a parent to find out your child has a diagnosis of autism or any special needs. Right. But I always say this, it doesn't mean you stop living. It does change your life. I'm not going to tell you that it doesn't. It just allows you to live differently. The first thing you should do is take a deep breath, right? Because you're getting ready, unfortunately, to go on a roller coaster ride. I remember when I first got my diagnosis, and it was harrowing, it was overwhelming because I didn't know a lot about autism. But I remember this woman saying to me one day, she said, you're going to have good days, mm-hmm. You're going to have bad days, you're going to have worse days, yeah. And you're going to have worse days. Like, why would you say something like that to a mother who's recently diagnosed? But she said, as long as you get those resources that he needs, mm-hmm. to help enhance his skills, right. And make him more productive, mm-hmm. you will see better days. And I'm here 14 years later telling you that I am seeing better days because I did follow up and making sure I got him the necessary resources, mm-hmm. and the services and the programs, and starting with early intervention. Early intervention is very key, which children can get up to the age of 3 through the state of New Jersey. I think that's very important. It's interesting because I remember this woman coming in my home. Uh-huh. I'm pacifying Nason because he's my baby. He's also now my baby who has special needs. Right. And of course, as a parent, we're nurturing by default. And I'm telling him, no. And I'm talking to him in a baby type. And she's looking at me and she's saying, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm telling him, no, that's not how you do it. Because at the end of the day, he's not going to always be your little cute little boy. You have to understand, you have to speak to our children the way that you would speak to any other typical child. Right. So, she gave me some tools that day that truly helped me understand it better, because as we can fast forward 14 years later, he's 6'6", almost 300 pounds. So it's very important to get community involved. I tell people all the time, school is there, and school is just one piece of the puzzle for us. Mm-hmm. Yeah. School can offer a variety of resources and services, which our children are entitled to. Mm-hmm. I want parents to understand that school districts are obligated to give our children the best possible education that they can get. Right. And that comes with services with a special needs child. Mm-hmm. But we as parents also have an obligation to ensure we get children outside resources. Again, school, 6 hours a day, one piece. we still got to cover those other hours in the day. So it's important that you seek out OT,
Mm-hmm.
PT, ABA, speech, whatever your child needs to enhance their skills, you need to do that on the outside. And don't expect school to, I think there's a misconception with a lot of our parents that sending their children to school is going to fix their child.
Right.
No, it takes a community effort. It takes a village, so to speak. So what I would say again to that question is get everyone involved. Find out what your insurance companies pay for,
Right.
because a lot of them will pay for services like ABA, which is something very needed for a lot of our children, and it's very important. So what I would say is to seek out, the resources in your community. There's a wealth of information out there now and resources that weren't there for me 14 years ago.
Mhm. Okay, thank you so much for that. So I know you mentioned, building your village and tapping into a lot of the resources that may be around these families, whether it be in their communities, whether it be in their schools, whether it be a resource that their insurance may offer them. So can you tell me about how you've built your village, as well as maybe how a family can begin to, I guess, piece together what their village should look like or could look like for their family?
Well, as with autism, it's not a one size fit all.
Mm-hmm.
Spectrum is so broad. So what may work with one family may not work for another, or the dynamics in that may not be the same. I
Mm-hmm.
can tell you, Nandi, about 80 to 85% of the families that we serve through Nadines Place are single parent households. Some have multiple children on the spectrum. Some just have multiple children in general, and they're struggling day to day
Mm-hmm.
just to survive in this world that we're now living in.
Yeah.
But more importantly, a lot of them have lost their friends.
Mm-hmm.
Their families have pretty much walked away. And I think it has a lot to do with ignorance. And ignorance is just not knowing or understanding what autism is, because the behaviors, as you know, are challenging. And, for people who truly don't understand it, it could be a little disturbing, as a child will hit, they can kick, they can start screaming at a moment's notice. What people call tantrums, I call involuntary meltdowns for our children. So a lot of families are just ignorant of it, and they don't want their children around it because they think, I remember one person told me, I just didn't want to catch it. People don't understand that autism is not a disease,
Mm-hmm.
it's a disorder,
Right.
but it's something that, I believe is important to educate. One of the things that I have a philosophy on, I said, if we can educate others, we can stomp out the ignorance, then we can gain the acceptance. Once we gain the acceptance, we can gain the help. But these families need to reach out to any family members who's willing and opening up their hearts, because
Mm-hmm.
it's not an easy journey. We have families who don't even take their kids outside
Right.
because of the stigma associated or because of the meltdowns. And then top of that, with family members who pretty much say, I don't want my kid around there, or you can't come to our birthday parties because your child is going to cause a scene. Build your village carefully.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing I can tell you, my journey is a little different from others, right? I had a village, in a sense. I had my children,
Mm-hmm.
I had my husband, who was there to help. What I didn't have is I didn't have a lot of my family. And I think one of the biggest hurts for me through this journey in the very beginning was my mom, who was my best friend.
Mm-hmm.
And for her, to accept this or not accept it, it was challenging. So, it took a minute. My mom is on board now, because honestly, my mom actually had to deal with not just one diagnosis of autism. She
Mm-hmm.
had to deal with two. I also have a nephew who's 3 months older than my son. My
Mm-hmm.
sister-in-law and I were both pregnant at the same time. And
Okay.
both of our children have been diagnosed on the autism spectrum. My nephew is a little much higher functioning than Nason.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that you have your two grandsons, both diagnosed within probably less than a year of each other, it was overwhelming for her. But it took a minute. But it's important that family gets to understand it and educate them. One of the other things that I think is important to do, depending on where you live, is let your neighbors know that
Yeah.
you have a child with a disability. It's called autism, and explain to them. I think people are more accepting of understanding something if they're educated about
Right.
it.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And I think that you brought up so many important points as it relates to building your village. I think that, you know, sometimes even for some of the families that I may come into contact with, it's, you know, they may only be looking for acceptance and within their family and then become isolated when they're potentially not going to either friends or, you know, other moms or dads that, you know, have a similar experience as them, and you know, even not telling their neighbors because of, you know, the fear of, you know, embarrassment or judgment and things like that. But as you said, if we're wanting for, you know, our world to be more accepting, and if we're wanting to bring people into our lives that can support us, then it's important for us to educate them, because if they don't know what's happening, like you mentioned, they could think, oh, I can catch it, or you know, have less empathy when they're just unaware of what's going on. So thank you so much for, you know, sharing that information. So are there certain key people that you believe a family should reach out to?
Oh, most definitely. I mean, first thing I think is important is to get to know your school's services, what type of programs that are in your school district,
Mhm.
because each child has a classification. And if you don't have the proper diagnosis for that child, you will not get the proper services in the school district. And it is important for you as a parent or caregiver of that child to know what your child needs. I mean, so often I can tell you that, you know, we do go into school districts and they have their team that comes and they do their evaluation of our children. But I tell any parent, you know, get your own evaluation as
Mhm.
well. It's very important to do that. You know your child better than anyone else. You know, you have someone who comes in and they evaluate our children for
Mhm.
maybe a half hour, an hour, but they
Right.
really don't get the true picture. And most of our children are true to form. When they're getting evaluated, you never see the behaviors that we see at
Mhm.
home.
Right.
I think it's very important that you get your own evaluations, that you do definitely get to know who your case managers are, who
Mhm.
your superintendent is, who your special education director is, and you get to familiarize yourselves with the services or the entitlement of what your children should be getting in a classroom. And that could include OT, that could include speech, that can include PT,
Mhm.
whatever services your child needs to have in that classroom, you should be getting in contact with all those people that will be working with him or her. And it's very important that you, as a parent, do your research.
Mhm.
I'll tell any parent, you know, put the work in. A lot of times, we as parents take in account, we take for granted that, you know, the school districts are doing their due diligence, and most of
Mhm.
them are. But,
Mhm.
you know, we as parents have to do our due diligence and do our own research, because some of our children can fall between the cracks, but we must, as parents, work with the school districts. I believe that it's important that we work together. You know, unfortunately, there's cases where, you know, that does not happen.
Right.
But I think it's important for us to all be positive and come to the table together collectively. And I
Mhm.
think if we can do that, our children will be able to be the best that they can be, and we have the right support. So definitely within the school system, you need to know all your players, and
Mhm.
especially that teacher. And I got to say this because most of the time when our children have one-on-one supports, you know, those are the TAs or the
Uh-huh.
teachers in the classroom, they're often forgotten. And I
Yeah.
want to make this point. Whenever you're doing your IEP, which is your individual education plan, make sure that every person that comes in contact with your child for their educational plan is a part of that plan. You
Mhm.
know, the TAs or the paraprofessionals or whatever you would like to call them,
Mhm.
they are the most instrumental people in that classroom for your teacher. I mean, for your child, other than that teacher who, you know, if she has 5 children or 6 children in that class and one needs more support, that power is going to be that person. So
Right.
just make sure you get to know all of the players. And then outside of school,
Mhm.
again, I talked about it, getting that ABA, getting that PT, getting that OT, you know,
Mhm.
finding programs in your community that may cater to special needs children, because they still need that socialization.
Right.
You know, school is more driven towards and academics
Mhm.
and, you know, making sure we get what the child needs academically. but they also need socially.
Right.
You know, you get a little social in the classrooms, but not enough. So we got to cover all aspects of that.
Okay. And I know you mentioned just doing your research and looking into your community for resources. So I find that oftentimes, you know, parents will mention to me that they're unable to find certain resources. How would a parent go about finding like resources?
Well, I think with the internet being the way that it is today, you can Google a lot and you can find out just by typing in, you know, autism organizations in Essex County. I can tell you when I started out, I did that. I couldn't find any.
Yeah.
I found them, they just weren't in my community.
Right.
And that was very frustrating to me. But, you know, as I said, you know, 14 years later after my diagnosis, there are so many resources out there. There are so many parents, and this is what I say to parents. We can't expect anyone to do for our children if we're not going to put in the work to do for our children. So, you know, getting those resources and getting those programs and events, like I couldn't understand how come we didn't have a sensory friendly movie day? I saw AMC and some of the suburban communities doing it,
Yeah.
but there was nothing in Essex County in urban inner city. And the city of Newark has the only theater that I know about that
Yeah.
is in the urban inner city in Essex County. And I reached out to them 7 years ago, and I asked, and I got to tell you, 7 years since then, we've been doing a sensory friendly movie day once a month. You know, now that COVID's happened, of
Yeah.
course, it stopped. But you know, the operation manager over there, Frank Gonzalez, opened up those doors for us. And you know, even though he didn't know a lot about autism, he asked me, well, what, you know, is autism? I educated him on it, and you know, we've been in there. He's family now. He
Right.
understands the needs of these children. And it's interesting because even talking about the movie day, I remember a mother telling me, you know, Nason's place saved her life at the movie
Wow.
theater. I'm looking at her and I'm like, what do you mean we saved your life?
Yeah.
You don't understand. I think her son was 13 at that time. She said, I haven't taken him back to a movie since he was 3 because when we went, it was a horrible experience. People were
Wow.
telling us to be quiet, get out, because our children are a little challenged when they go into certain environments. And she said she had never taken him back to a movie and she never thought she would in her community. And because of Nason's place offering those sensory friendly movie days, she was now able to come out into the community. And there's no judgment. Every parent in that room knows, or every person who comes to a sensory friendly movie day with Nason's place know that
Right.
they may have some noise going on. You may have to turn the volume down, the lights up, but they know it's a sensory friendly, and that's key for us. One of the things I also want to say is important to one of your questions because I wanted to address it. I think you asked about what other resources, what should they do?
Oh
Find
yeah.
a support group. Find a support group in your community. And then find Nason's place if you're in the Essex County community, or you don't have to be in Essex County. I actually talk to people in other states, from Indiana to Florida to Georgia, just helping them navigate, but every state is different.
Wow. Well, I just want to say, you know, thank you so much for all of the knowledge that you shared and also your experience. And I'm sure that those that are watching are probably really interested in learning more about, you know, you and what you do if they already don't know about you, because I feel like everyone globally already knows about you. So I'd be very surprised if they didn't. However, if it is that someone wants to, you know, further connect with you or you know, join some of the events that you do with your organization, can you tell us how they can get into contact with you on social media or your website?
To reach out to Nason's Place, you can visit us at www.nasonsplace.org. And phone number for us is 973-424-7781. I have a philosophy that Nason's Place can't stop the diagnosis, but we can help the families affected by it. And I also believe a zip code should not be the reason any child goes without much needed resources that will allow them to live the full productive lives that they should. And just know that you're not alone.
Well, thank you again so much, Nadine, for all that you've shared with us today.
Well, thank you for having me, and keep up the good work that you're doing. I mean, I just want people to know, because I felt alone prior to starting Nason's Place. Nason's Place has been my therapy. It has been my my, as soul food, your food for your soul. This has been my food for my soul, and helping others and understanding autism better, because it is a broad spectrum that can take you around and around and around.